So I haven't posted one of these videos in a while. I have the surveys for all the driftless area in Wisconsin. I'm going from the south part to the north part. As the previous videos, this is electrofishing data for streams, and they shock a certain distance of stream and attempt to net every trout that comes up when they electrofish, and then they go a certain distance and collect all the trout that come up, and then they use that to determine trout per mile, and then they measure them and they weigh them in some of the surveys. And this county is probably better known for deer hunting than for trout fishing, but there are a decent amount of trout streams in this county. I don't think I've ever been to Buffalo County, Wisconsin before, so I know absolutely nothing about these streams. So I am just going to be rambling on about what the surveys say, and you can compare this to the other county surveys I have. So the first stream is where eagles like to hang out, and the eagles have an anala trout out of the creek. This stream has a decent population of brook trout, and the largest ones they caught was 11.4 inches, and it has some brown trout, but the largest brown trout they caught in their surveys was 13.9 inches. So this is a creek you may want to try. I don't know how good or bad it is or whether there's much public land on it, but it's a possible creek to try. The next creek is Lamandi Creek, and this creek also has both brown and brook trout, and there's more brook trout than brown trout. They did catch some brookies which are decent size, 12.9 inches in the one survey, and there's quite a few brook trout over 10 inches at the one location they shocked. And the biggest brown, they did catch a 20-inch brown, which is a pretty big brown. The next creek is Trout Creek, and if it's named Trout Creek, there has to be lots of trout in the creek. And this creek has quite a few brook trout in it, and it has a few brown trout in it. This county has more brook trout in it than counties farther south in the driftless area. The next creek is Tamarack Creek. I assume there's a tamarack bog by it, but I could be completely wrong. This creek has a lot of brook trout in it. So if you want to catch brook trout, this would be a good creek to try. The next creek is Mill Creek, and there probably once was a mill on Mill Creek, and Mill Creek has brook trout in it and has an okay amount. And this was surveyed a long time ago, so it could be completely different. Unfortunately, the surveys aren't up to date. I just had this data sitting around and I decided to make it into videos. The next creek is Little Wamandi Creek, and Little Lamandi Creek has both brook and brown trout, and it has a lot more brook trout than brown trout, and it has some decent sized brook trout in it. So if you want to fish for brook trout, this would be a good creek to try. The next creek is Killness Creek. Killness Creek has some brook trout in it and a few brown trout in it. It doesn't have a very high number of trout compared to some of the other streams, but I assume this is a small creek, but I could be completely wrong. The next creek is Little Bear Creek. I'd be very careful looking out for bears cubs if I was fishing at this creek. And this creek has some brook trout in it, but they did catch some pretty large brook trout. The next creek is Elk Creek. I bet you there's a lot of elk that hang out by Elk Creek. And this creek has brook trout and brown trout in it, but it has a lot more brook trout in it than brown trout, and there's some decent sized brook trout in it. The next creek is Downstair Creek, or I could probably pronounce that wrong, or Downstair Creek. And this creek has both brook trout and brown trout, and it has a lot more brook trout than brown trout, but they did survey some good size, both brook trout and brown trout in it. So this might be an okay creek to try. The next creek is Dole Creek, And this creek has only a few brook trout in it. The next creek is Big Bear Creek, and I bet you there's some big bears that live by this creek, and they probably ate all the trout out of it, and that's why they only caught a few brook trout in this survey of it. And I think that's it.